I knew the tides were turning when my Jira access got downgraded the same morning. They asked me to polish up the company history slide, the one where the CEO forgets to mention who built the actual product. 6 years. 6 years of 18-hour sprints, caffeine IVs, and surviving 3 CTOs and 2 rewrites. I wrote the bones of our platform in a freezing studio apartment with a space heater that smelled like burnt dust and raccoon piss. Back then, our cloud infrastructure was a hacked-together server farm in a buddy's basement, one surge away from setting the house on fire. Now, now we're in a downtown glass box with $30K espresso machines and an office manager named Skylar who won't stop reminding me to smile more. Anyway, I had just finished running postmortem on a failed container upgrade. Because yes, despite being head of backend, I was still debugging shit at 1 a.m. When I saw the Slack ping, "Hey Jordan, quick ask from CEO's niece smiling face with smiling eyes, can you put together some handoff notes for the series of pitch? Just high-level stuff so she's prepped. Handoff, notes, for meeting I architected the entire platform to enable. Pause for dramatic irony, I hadn't even been told I wasn't attending the meeting. I had to find out via emoji. Before we go further, do me a quick favor. If you're listening and your blood pressure's starting to climb, you're probably one of the 97% who enjoy these stories but haven't hit the subscribe button yet. Go on, tap that follow and drop a like. It means the world to our small, overcaffeinated team of justice junkies. All right, back to the train wreck. Let me tell you about Madeline, the CEO's niece, recent communications sciences grad who once asked me if cloud native meant we stored data in the weather. She walked into our office with a ring light, a Canvas subscription, and the confidence of a person who thinks 2 semesters of intro psych qualifies her to teach leadership seminars. Now don't get me wrong, I've seen worse hires, but they don't usually show up to all-hands meetings wearing athleisure and calling the code base the content. Her first big initiative, a pitch deck where she misspelled our platform name on the title slide. Her second, scheduling a company-wide vibe audit. I wish I was kidding. It wasn't personal until it was. 3 days after her arrival, I was pulled into a strategic alignment sync with our CEO and VP of Biz Dev. They complimented my historical stewardship and architectural foresight, which, if you've worked in tech long enough, is code for get ready to be replaced by someone cheaper, hotter, or related to someone richer. Then came the real kicker. We're thinking of letting Maddie co-lead the series of presentation. You've done such a great job laying the groundwork. Now we just need someone to really sell the story. I stared. Deadpan. You mean someone with zero technical understanding, who once asked if our backend was like the back of a restaurant? The CEO laughed like I'd made a dad joke. Jordan, don't be territorial. This is about optics. Investors love fresh perspective. Yeah, fresh like mold in a Yeti cooler, so I played nice. Said of course, walked out and messaged Mel. Mel's my lawyer. Sharp, fast-talking, and built like a woman who wins fights in airport bars. We went to grad school together, then took wildly different roads, me into code, her into contracts that make grown men cry. You still own the license architecture, right? She asked. I paused. My brain clicked through 6 years of commits, git logs, and buried clauses. Then I smiled. Oh yeah, I said. I definitely still do. And just like that, I stopped reacting and started planning. The email subject line read, Series of Prep. Presentation team finalized party popper. I opened it in the break room while waiting for the industrial Keurig to stop screaming. Half the staff had already seen it. Skylar had posted it on the big screen in the lounge like it was the damn Super Bowl. There it was, in Helvetica and Heartbreak. Maddie will be co-leading the series of presentation with our VP of Business Development, Travis. With her fresh take and deep understanding of the platform's growth potential, we're confident this combo will wow investors. No mention of me, not even a footnote. I was the one who built the licensing structure they were pitching. I was the one who wrote the contract framework that made enterprise scaling legally viable. And now the intern with lip gloss and LinkedIn buzzwords was co-leading. I forwarded the email to Mel with no subject line, just the file. 10 minutes later, I got a call. I'm sorry, did they snub you out of your own architecture? You're not surprised. I'm offended. That's different. Mel's voice was dry, sharp, caffeinated. Tell me they haven't redistributed platform rights internally. Please tell me you didn't sign off on any sublicensing. Mel, I haven't touched the contributor agreement since 2019. They tried to push a new one last year. I declined. She paused. I could hear her lighting a cigarette in that echoing way lawyers do when they're about to either save your ass or set something on fire. You still own the license architecture, right? Clause 4.3c. Recursive authorization. Triggers if any new license path is created without original architect approval. Mel exhaled smoke and satisfaction. Then let them pitch. Just don't stop them. 2 days later, I tried to peek at the investor deck out of sheer masochism. Blocked. My file access had been quietly revoked. Not even a PDF copy. Not even mere data. It ghosted me out of the pitch like I was a bad Tinder date who brought up Roth IRAs too early. That's when I noticed something worse. Slack DMs, leaked screenshots, One from Maddie to the content team. We should highlight how I made the enterprise tier scalable. That's a big value add. Another one from her to Travis. Jordan's stuff is cool, but I cleaned up the mess. Investors love a turnaround story. I had to reread that twice. The mess she was referring to. That was the dynamic licensing stack that let us scale to 300K users without breaching a single compliance zone. She cleaned it up by changing the font on a dashboard header. I didn't respond, didn't confront, didn't march into the CEO's office and demand recognition like some disposable scene in a made-for-streaming corporate drama. I did what I always do, documented everything. I pulled the Git diffs, grabbed the audit logs, archived the EULA clause I'd written years ago, back when I was still naive enough to think startup family meant anything but they'll eat you last. Clause 4.3c wasn't an afterthought, it was the fuse. A licensing clause so dense, so self-referencing, it practically triggered its own legal Rube Goldberg machine the second someone tried to reroute it without permission. Back then, I'd embedded it out of paranoia. But now it was prophecy. Mel and I started sketching out the letter, the one that would put the clause into motion. She called it a nuclear option wrapped in dry legalese. I called it Tuesday. I almost let it go. That's the sick part. For one full, lukewarm evening, I actually sat there on my busted couch, sipping grocery store Chardonnay straight from the bottle like a middle manager in a mid-season breakdown episode, convincing myself maybe this was just how it ended. Maybe I'd take the severance, slap together a consulting resume, and fade out like the rest of us who got too good at the invisible work. My inbox was a museum of cowardice. Passive-aggressive thanks again for everything. Messages, a Slack from the CEO saying, let's circle back post-series to revisit your scope, and a calendar invite for an exit alignment with HR, subject line. Quick chat smiling face with smiling eyes. Quick chat my ass. Was around 11:40 p.m. I couldn't sleep, obviously. So I did what every burned-out dev does when they're emotionally spiraling. I opened the staging branch to doomscroll commit logs like they were old texts from an ex. Just needed to see something I don't know familiar. Mine, and there it was. Buried in the commit message from some junior engineer I'd never met, added legacy auth hooks to Maddie's enterprise growth tier legacy auth hooks. My auth hooks. My recursive access logic. Wrapped in a half-baked API extension labeled growth tier v2, which, by the way, I had never signed off on. They hadn't even changed the variable names. Just copied it like some kid lifting a book report off Spark Notes and praying the teacher wouldn't notice. Except this teacher has a law degree on speed dial. The worst part, it built this shiny new paywalled feature tier directly on top of the architecture I licensed to the company under strict terms. No modification, no redistribution, no sublicensing, without my explicit contractual sign-off. I just sat there, mouth open, bottle tilted, muttering, "Are you kidding me?" Like I was in a bad commercial for ulcer medication. I logged into my private dev repo, pulled the original framework, checked the timestamped EULA clauses we'd filed years ago. Everything lined up. The violation wasn't just technical, it was nuclear. I sent Mel a one-liner, found the breach. Want to see the receipts? 3 minutes later, she was in the Google Doc with me, dropping comments like, "Oh, they're gonna choke on this," and LOL, did they even read this clause? We started drafting the trigger letter. Clean language, no threats, just a formal notification that, due to unauthorized sublicensing, Section 4.3c was now active, and all downstream licensing rights were temporarily suspended pending reauthorization from the original architect. Me, the woman they ghosted off the calendar invite. Somewhere around 1:30 a.m., I slouched back in my chair and thought, this is too much, just walk away. But my brain, the traitor, had already cued the flashback. 2 jobs ago, different startup, different CEO, same betrayal. I was younger then, dumber, still thought NDAs meant something and HR had your back. I built out a prototype backend for telehealth app, secure, scalable, clean, and then watched them strip my credentials, rip out my name, and launch the platform with a redesigned UI and his face on the press release. They told me I should be flattered. That's when I started writing strange little clauses, defensive architecture, ownership traps, legal landmines masked as boilerplate. You see Section 4.3c and think it's some throwaway legalese, but if you know the system, you realize that clause is a recursive lock. It doesn't just break things, it proves who built them. And now here I was again. They'd handed the mic to a nepotism hire in platform sneakers. They'd rewritten history and stuck a glossy cover on top, but they forgot one thing. I never stopped being the architect, so no, I wasn't going to walk away. I was going to burn the stage down before they ever reached the mic. The series of meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp in some Croman marble conference mausoleum downtown, the kind of place where the bottled water has French vowels and the receptionist wears a headset like she's launching a shuttle. I wasn't invited, not officially. The email said I was welcome to attend as a supporting resource. Supporting, like a throw pillow, or a backup generator, so I dressed the part. Black blazer, subtle makeup, hair up, not polished, weaponized. Mel met me outside the building wearing a charcoal suit, mirrored sunglasses, and an expression that said, "Cross me and I'll end your startup and your marriage in one briefcase." "You ready?" she asked, pulling a single sheet of paper from her bag, our enforcement notice, printed on thick, smug lawyer paper. I just smiled and said, "Let her cook." Inside, the room looked like an AI-generated stock photo of innovative business culture. Glass walls, wireless everything. A giant display screen in the center, already lit up with a title slide that read, Platform Growth and IP Strategy, presented by Madeline Avery and Travis Green. I didn't sit at the table. I took a chair in the back. No nameplate, no eye contact. Mel settled in beside me and whispered, "This is going to be fun." The niece took the stage well, the front of the room, with the kind of bounce in her step that comes from never having been publicly humiliated in your professional life. Yet, she clicked to slide 2, a roadmap. Over the past 6 months, she began, we've completely re-engineered the platform's licensing architecture to allow seamless scalability across enterprise clients. We call it Growth Tier 2.0. I nearly swallowed my own tongue. Slide 3 showed a diagram of the API endpoints. The diagram I designed, the exact one down to the mislabeled webhook I'd always meant to fix but forgot. There it was, blown up in HD, rebranded with pastel gradients and her personal logo in the corner, Avery Tech Insights. Travis nodded along like a bobblehead in business casual. The investors watched politely, pens twitching like they'd already decided their questions 3 slides ago. Maddie, for her part, was on a roll. Buzzwords flew like confetti at a mall grand opening, leveraging recursive protocoling to auto-scale access dependencies, hypermodular plugins for strategic client-side elasticity. The platform's backend was inherited but optimized for storytelling potential. Mel leaned toward me. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means she doesn't know what a backend is," I murmured, keeping my face completely blank. She clicked again. Slide 7. Client dashboard redesign unlocking data empowerment. The screen filled with mocked-up screenshots of the admin panel I'd written in one brutal Red Bull-fueled week last summer after Travis promised no rush and then scheduled a demo 48 hours later. They hadn't even changed the sample usernames. One of them still said Jordan Root. Mel stifled a laugh with her palm. I stayed quiet, expressionless. Cold detachment was the game now. If I blinked too fast, someone might notice I was still alive. Maddie wrapped up the first half of the pitch by thanking the incredible dev team who brought this vision to life. No names, no credits, and then handed it off to Travis for the monetization strategy, ACA, more buzzwords and lies. Across the table, I saw one of the investors, the only one under 40, tilt his head at a line in the deck. He nudged his colleague and whispered, "Who wrote the license logic?" No one answered. Travis cleared his throat and said, "It's proprietary. Fully owned by the company under standard licensing clauses." Mel smiled. I could feel her sharpening her teeth. The head investor leaned forward. "Can we see the original terms?" The CEO, sitting at the far end like some bloated king watching his fools perform, casually waved toward Maddie. "All of that's been consolidated into a newer framework, of course. Of course." The laptop in front of Mel came alive. She opened a document, typed exactly 2 lines. Then she spun the screen around. Across that sleek, sterile table, every investor, every VP, every liar got their first look at the loaded gun. Section 4.3c, recursive authorization invalidation. The room didn't go silent. It went static. You could hear someone's watch ticking. Travis blinked like he was trying to remember his own name. The CTO, who'd been staring down at his phone like this was beneath him, suddenly snapped upright. The lead dev, seated 2 chairs away from Maddie, leaned in close to the screen. His face drained. His lips moved, but only one word escaped. "It's a loop." And that's when the fun really began. The investor in the navy blazer, some sharp-jawed finance type with a watch that probably cost more than my first car, tapped his pen twice and asked the question that sliced through the lingering buzzwords like a scalpel. Who exactly owns the core licensing logic? The CEO blinked. You could almost see the Rolodex in his head spinning. He opened his mouth and let loose one of those drawn-out, stalling chuckles he uses when he doesn't know if he's about to lie or choke on his own arrogance. Well, the platform is, of course, a team effort, built collaboratively under our IP framework. That's not what I asked, the investor cut in. The architecture, the licensing system, who holds the rights? Maddie shifted uncomfortably beside the screen, visibly sweating through her blouse's trendy botanical pattern. Her lip gloss looked like it was about to melt off her face. She glanced at Travis. Travis looked at the CEO. The CEO looked like he wanted to vaporize through the floor. And I sat there like a marble statue, hands folded in my lap, watching the first cracks bloom. Mel, ever the silent assassin, slid her laptop halfway across the polished table toward the investor-side attorney. The screen was bright, bold, and ready for war. One document, one clause, highlighted. Section 4.3c, recursive authorization invalidation. The lawyer read it once, blinked, then read it again, slower this time. His expression changed somewhere between mild interest and Jesus Christ. The CTO, who'd been leaning back like this was just another fluffy pitch session, suddenly sat bolt upright. He squinted at the screen. The lead developer, poor bastard, leaned forward and mouthed the words silently as he read. Then it hit him. You could actually see the color drain from his face like a paint bucket knocked over in reverse. He turned to the CTO, voice barely above a whisper. She built a recursive lock into the licensing framework. If the original architect doesn't authorize the sublicensing path, the system auto-invalidates every derivative access credential pause. And it already triggered. Mel leaned back, crossed her legs, and said, almost sweetly, that's what happens when you pitch stolen architecture with a Canva slide deck and a winged eyeliner tutorial. The CEO sputtered. Wait, this clause, it's not enforceable. It's buried in legacy documentation. We've updated everything. Mel didn't even look at him. You updated the marketing decks. You didn't touch the EULA. And unfortunately for you, the clause was filed with the IP registry and referenced in your own security audit last quarter. The CTO started furiously typing on his laptop. His mouth moved, counting API endpoints like a man running out of lifeboats. The lead dev just kept shaking his head, hands on his temples. She wasn't kidding, he muttered. It's a loop. It's not just legal, it's operational. Recursive lock cascades down from the master license. Once the flag flips, the endpoints start invalidating their own access calls. The client dashboards, he stopped, swallowed, looked at Maddie like she'd just driven a rental car off a cliff. They're gone. Silence, thick and wet. Maddie finally spoke, weakly. Wait, can't we just, remove it? Lead dev looked at her like she'd suggested duct taping a bullet wound. No, she built the loop. My face didn't move. My heart didn't race. But inside, something cooled. Not like revenge, colder, like silence after a storm, like that exact moment when a frozen lake cracks under the feet of the idiot who thought it could hold him. I did, I said, voice even and soft. I built the system to protect proprietary logic from unauthorized redistribution, and I watched you all violate it, repeatedly. The CEO tried to stand, tried to reclaim control. His voice hit that fake-friendly register he uses when firing people over lunch. Jordan, let's not make this into some kind of legal melodrama. We're all on the same team here. Mel laughed. You haven't been on her team since you gave a job offer to someone who thinks JSON is a skincare brand. Travis opened his mouth to speak and promptly closed it again. That was probably his best contribution all quarter. The investors exchanged glances. Quiet murmurs. One of them, older, gray-haired, probably the check writer, scribbled something on a notepad and whispered to his associate, "This tanks the valuation." I stayed seated, silent, still. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to scream or pound the table. Control wasn't something I had to seize. It was something they'd already handed me, they just didn't read the terms. The lawyer on the investor side cleared his throat. Loudly. The kind of sound a man makes when he's about to announce a funeral and a lawsuit in the same breath. I need to read this aloud, he said, already standing. The big screen flickered as he mirrored Mel's laptop. Section 4.3c took over the room like a verdict. In the event of unauthorized sublicensing or derivative framework instantiation, without explicit consent from the original architecture license holder, recursive authorization invalidation will be triggered. This invalidates downstream API access for all dependent clients, including enterprise dashboards, analytics modules, and admin override protocols. Reinstatement requires primary licensee reauthentication and written sign-off. There was a beat, and then the room went to hell. The junior engineer, barely old enough to drink and currently dying inside, gasped, "Oh my God." The client dashboards, they're gone. The lead dev yanked out his laptop. He was already logged into the monitoring console. One glance at the cascading error logs and he stopped breathing through his nose. Recursive loops active, he said, voice flat. It's not just the dashboards. Internal tools, reporting pipelines, the entire backend auth tree, it's eating itself. The CTO, sweating bullets now, barked at him. Can we kill it? Hard reset? The kid shook his head. Not without triggering the kill switch. It's booby-trapped. If we override it without license approval, the root access keys get wiped. Forever. Travis looked like he was trying to disappear into his own blazer. His hands trembled on the water bottle he hadn't touched in 20 minutes. Across the table, one of the investors muttered, "This platform isn't operational." Another replied, "This isn't negligence. This is a time bomb." Maddie stood frozen near the screen, blinking rapidly, clearly trying to remember what recursive meant. She managed to squeak out one of the worst lines in corporate history. "Wait, can't we just remove it?" Lead dev turned toward her like a man who had just watched someone toss a match into a gasoline-soaked wedding dress. He didn't yell. He didn't mock. He just whispered it like a death sentence. "No." She built the loop. All heads turned to me. I finally stood, not with fury, not with pride, just inevitability. "It's not about revenge," I said quietly. "It's about trust. You took 6 years of work, stripped my name off of it, put someone else in front of cameras to lie about it, and you licensed it illegally." Mel stepped beside me, folding her arms. Clause 4.3c was filed, timestamped, registered, and it's enforceable. You didn't read your own contracts. You tried to sell a house without checking who holds the deed. The CEO, red-faced and seething, tried to interject, "We have legal counsel." They signed off. "No, they didn't," Mel said, pulling out a printed copy of their last legal audit. "You buried this clause because you didn't understand it. You assumed the architect wouldn't notice. You assumed wrong. The CTO slumped back in his chair, suddenly very interested in the ceiling tiles. Investor voices layered over each other now. How much client data is inaccessible? Did they already breach compliance? Can we walk this back? What the hell did we just sit through? Travis opened his mouth to say something that probably started with "let's all stay calm," but his voice cracked and died halfway out. Good. And Maddie, sweet, unqualified Maddie, had finally run out of filters and flair. Her eyeliner smudged, her jaw trembled, and in that moment she realized what everyone else had. She was on stage in front of a full room pitching a product that didn't exist anymore. I turned to Mel. Let's hand them the proposal. She passed a second folder down the table, as calm as a nurse with a morphine drip. Inside, an offer, reinstatement rights, governance restructuring, founder equity redistribution, my name back on the license. In bold, the system can be restored, I said, but only if I do it. The CEO stared at the document like it might bite him. This is blackmail, no, Mel said. This is your new operating agreement, or your obituary, dealer's choice. Dead silence. Then, for the first time in that entire meeting, I saw it in his eyes. Not hate, not arrogance. Respect. The kind that only comes when someone realizes they've been playing checkers on your chessboard. The CEO, desperate and deluded, tried to bluff. He stood, hands flared, voice suddenly too loud for the room. Okay, folks, let's all take a breath. This is just a misunderstanding, some outdated clause nobody flagged. We'll get legal on it, patch whatever this is. Be back online in, what? A few hours. The lead dev didn't even lift his head. We're not back online in a few hours, he muttered. We're not back online at all unless she re-authenticates the root license. One of the investors, the older one with the Montblanc pen and thousand-yard stare, capped his notes and stood up. No drama, just a quiet signal, we're done here. His associate leaned in and whispered, not quietly enough, this just tanked the valuation. Second investor packed his laptop. A third pushed his chair back, face blank with corporate detachment, the kind you develop only after watching one too many $1 million bonfires up close. The room started bleeding credibility, and that's when I stood. For real, straightened my blazer, walked to the center of the room like I owned it because in a very specific, very enforceable way I did. My voice didn't need to rise. I didn't need the room to hush. It already had. The clause, I said, staring directly at the CEO, was designed to protect intellectual property from internal theft. A pause, I let it breathe, which this is. Mel was already pulling the proposal out of her folder. Clean layout, bullet points. No threats, just math. Here's what happens next, she said, passing copies down the line. We restore operational access. Jordan reauthorizes the licensing pathway. But that's contingent on three things. One investor raised an eyebrow. Which are? Mel smiled like a shark that just spotted blood through tinted goggles. First, Jordan is reinstated as principal architect with full governance oversight. Second, founder equity is redistributed according to original IP contributions, retroactively validated via the timestamp commit logs and signed audit trails. And third, 2 seats on the board go to neutral technical advisors, one of whom will be Jordan. The CEO sputtered, this is a hostile takeover. Mel didn't even look at him. This is a mercy clause. You stole code, built a revenue tier on stolen architecture, and tried to sell it as your own. If Jordan hadn't embedded Section 4.3c, your investors would be looking at a class action data breach lawsuit by Friday. There it was. No more spin, no more Nissan ring light presentations. Just truth, ugly and legally binding. Across the table, CTO looked up at me for the first time all morning. And for the first time in years, he looked sober. You wrote that clause from the start? I wrote everything from the start. Another beat. And then the lead investor nodded once, slow and final. She's the platform. The CEO tried to laugh again. It came out broken, hollow. She was supposed to be support, he muttered. No, I said. I was the failsafe. And now every fuse had been lit. I had 2 choices, honor the proposal or explain to every client why their dashboards were dead, their data in limbo, and their series a collapse because someone thought nepotism trumped infrastructure. Mel stood beside me, arms crossed. You have 48 hours. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I had already detonated the loop. Now I was offering them the only exit. The email went out that afternoon. Terse. Surgical. Subject, action required. License reinstatement terms from Mel to exec team board, investors you have 48 hours to finalize and sign the enclosed agreement. Failure to comply will result in irrevocable recursive lockout of all active API endpoints, database authorization layers, and client-side integrations. This is not a threat. It is the consequence of a breach. Sincerely, counsel to Jordan M. Hale, original architect. Platform core licensing logic, the timer started ticking. The niece was the first to flinch. Less than an hour later, HR got a Slack from the CEO. Please remove Madeline Avery from internal cap table, all platform permissions, and investor materials immediately. Reassign all series a narrative attribution to internal dev leadership. He didn't even bother CCing her. Word spread fast. The investors started circling like sharks with legal pads. One requested a full audit of Maddie's contributions. Another asked for the commit logs going back 5 years. Someone on the ops team panicked and tried to pull old screenshots off Slack to retroactively show collaborative development. It only made things worse. By the end of day one, I was sitting at home, sipping something brown and deserved, watching the access logs roll back into my inbox one by one. The CTO reinstated my root credentials without comment. Travis tried to schedule a call. I declined with a one-word reply, no. On day two, the CEO caved. He signed the new governance agreement with a hand so shaky, the signature looked like a lie detector readout. Mel watched him do it in silence. She didn't smile, neither did I. There was no victory lap, no fist-pumping finale, just cold, clean return. I wasn't back for title. I was back for the ledger. Equity was reissued based on contribution value, not job title. My name slid into the cap table like it had never left, except now it was bolded. They tried to offer me an apology in the boardroom, something half-scripted about miscommunication and evolving roles. I held up a hand. We're not doing the performance piece. Just fix what's broken. That night, a private calendar invite appeared. Investor strategy call, Jordan Hale only. I joined from my kitchen, wearing an old hoodie, hair still damp from the shower. 3 lead investors were already waiting. First off, one of them said, "You should have been leading this pitch from the start." I replied. They just didn't realize it. We went over the proposal I'd written for scaling the back end properly, actually scaling it, not the lipstick on a dashboard version Maddie had spun. They asked smart questions. Listened, took notes. No smug interruptions, no fake compliments. Before ending the call, one of them asked, "What do you need to stay?" I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know, but because it felt good to let them sit with the silence for once. Then I said, "I don't need to stay. I just need to make sure the system survives without liars at the helm." That was enough for them. After I logged off, I stared at the screen for a long time, not smiling, not triumphant, just still, not joy, not relief, just the cool, anchored quiet of a woman who rebuilt the foundation they tried to bury her under. This time, I wasn't part of the team. This time, I was the firewall. The server room hadn't changed. Same chilled air, same blue glow, same faint hum of anxious machines. But this time, I didn't walk in like a ghost. I walked in like a goddamn reckoning. The CTO met me at the door, pale, sweaty, holding the master keycard like it was radioactive. He didn't speak, just handed it over and stepped back like a man hoping not to be struck down for his sins. I swiped in, doors unlocked, the room breathed. 2 steps in, Mel trailed behind, heels echoing on the epoxy floor. "So this is it?" she asked. "The button that decides if their company lives or dies?" "No," I said, cracking my knuckles as I sat at the main terminal. That button was back in 2019 when I decided to trust them. The interface booted. Loop counter was still climbing. Errors, lockouts, security flags, an entire infrastructure slowly chewing through itself like a snake swallowing its own tail. One command. Authorize root override licensee equals jhail flag equals recursive unlock enter. Silence. Then the numbers stopped. Red logs cleared. Access pathways relit one by one. I disabled the loop, but I didn't remove the clause. Oh no. Clause 4.3c stayed right where it was. Loaded pistol on the table. A reminder. Mel crossed her arms behind me. "So what now?" I leaned back in the chair, watching the system stabilize. "We let them pitch again," I said, "but this time they asked permission." Back upstairs, the CEO tried to make small talk in the hallway, something about looking forward and bridges unburned. I walked past him without blinking. He didn't follow. He knew what they didn't know. What not a single soul on that cap table, or in that glass tower had caught onto yet, was this. While they were busy scrubbing me from the narrative and photoshopping my name out of every deck, I was building something else. I'd quietly pulled my original dev team back together months ago, one after another. The engineer they laid off in Q2, she's my new head of infrastructure. The QA lead they ghosted after maternity leave, she's running ops. The database architect they phased out, he wrote the core schema for our new product. And thanks to a little investor call that went better than anyone expected, we're already fully funded. Clean cap table, bulletproof EULA, no nepotism, no buzzwords, just talent and teeth. I didn't tell them, I didn't have to. At 6:17 the next morning, I boarded a plane, window seat, 1 carry-on, laptop, charger, sunglasses. Flight attendant smiled and handed me a coffee. "Are you heading to the Vegas Tech Summit?" she asked. I smiled back. "Yeah, keynote," she paused. "Are you Jordan Hale?" "That's me." The summit banner flashed across my phone screen. Featured speaker, Jordan Hale, architect of resilience. I sipped my coffee. Looked out the window as we climbed. Below me, the city shrank, the buildings just shadows. I left the clause in place. Because next time, there won't be a warning. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.